My parents kicked me out of the house at 18. Zack, adults have to fend for themselves. I begged, give me more time, but they laughed. 2 years later, they went bankrupt and asked me to pay their bills, but I smiled and said, adults have to fend for themselves, and shut the door in their face. I'll never forget the smell of that house. A mix of fancy food that never made it to my plate, expensive cologne my parents wore to their important dinners, and the mildew from my old mattress in the corner of the room, which felt like a basement where I slept. My name is Zack, and this is my story. It's not pretty, not one of those that makes you feel good at first, but if you stick around until the end, I promise you'll understand why I did what I did. My parents never loved me. They didn't say it outright, but they didn't have to. I felt it in every scornful glance, every sharp comment, every time they told me to shut up while they planned their next vacation. I was the kid who didn't fit into their perfect life. My dad, Michael, was a tall guy with a loud laugh that filled the house when he was with his buddies, but with me, he barely grunted. My mom, Susan, was colder, always with that "what a nuisance you are" look whenever she saw me. As far back as I can remember, I was like a burden to them, someone who was only there because they couldn't avoid it. I grew up as their errand boy. Zack, go get the bread. Zack, wash the dishes. Zack, take out the trash. There was no please, no thank you. If I complained, they called me ungrateful, said I should be happy to have a roof over my head. But that roof didn't feel like a home. My clothes were always torn, patched up 1,000 times with ugly stitches my mom sewed grudgingly. Meanwhile, they bought themselves designer shirts, shiny shoes, and watches that cost more than I could ever imagine. I wore sneakers with holes until my toes poked out, while they strutted around in leather boots that smelled brand new. Food was another story. They ate steak, roasted chicken, pasta with sauces that smelled amazing. I sat in a corner of the table with a plate of leftovers, cold rice, scraps of meat they didn't want because they weren't in the mood, sometimes a bit of stale bread. If I asked for more, my dad would glare at me like I'd committed a crime and say, eat what we give you or don't eat at all. My mom wouldn't even look at me, just kept talking about her plans with her friends. Once when I was about 10, I dared to grab a piece of chicken from the main dish. My dad slapped my hand so hard the plate flew and smashed against the wall. That's not for you, useless, he yelled. That night, I went to bed hungry with a bruise on my hand. Vacations were the worst. Every summer, they'd leave for weeks to the beach or some nice city. I stayed home alone with a list of chores and a bit of rice in the pantry. You're big enough, Zack. Take care of the house, they'd say, as if I were an adult at 12. One time, they left for a whole month, and when they came back tan and happy, they found me sick with a fever, shivering. They didn't even ask how I was, just complained that I hadn't cleaned the yard. They always made me feel small. You're good for nothing. You'll never amount to anything. I wish we didn't have to deal with you. Those words stuck in my head like a tattoo. School wasn't so bad because at least there I got a decent meal for free, and the teachers didn't treat me like garbage. But at home, every day was a countdown. If it hadn't been for free school, I wouldn't have studied at all. They couldn't wait to get rid of me. I knew it since I was a kid. The day I turned 18, my life with them would be over. And so it was. My 18th birthday came on a cold Tuesday in November. No cake, no gifts, not even a happy birthday. That day, I woke up to my dad pounding on my bedroom door. Zack, get down here now, he shouted. I went downstairs trembling, thinking I'd forgotten some chore. My mom was there, arms crossed, and my dad was holding an old cardboard box. Happy birthday, he said, but his voice dripped with mockery. They handed me the box. Inside were my tattered clothes, my toothbrush, a couple of school notebooks, and an old baby picture of me, the only one they had. You're 18 now, Zack. Grown-ups have to fend for themselves. Get out of here, my dad said, and my mom smirked like it was a joke that I tried to speak. Please, I have nowhere to go. I don't have a job. I don't know how. Tears came on their own, my voice shaking. I knelt in front of them, begging, give me a little time, please, I'm not ready. But they laughed. My dad laughed, grabbed my arm, yanked me up like I was a rag, and shoved me toward the door. Don't be weak, Zack. The world doesn't wait for crybabies, he said. My mom opened the door, and they tossed the box at me. Don't come back bothering us, was the last thing I heard before they locked it. I stood there on the street, box in my hands, the cold slicing my face. I had no money, no close friends, no idea how to survive. I cried until I had no tears left, but they didn't open the door. That night, I slept in a park, using my old jacket as a pillow, stomach empty, heart in pieces. It was the darkest day of my life, but also the day something inside me changed. I swore I'd make it, not for them, but despite them. And one day, I thought they'd regret treating me like trash. Hunger woke me at dawn. My stomach growled like a trapped animal, and I didn't have a single coin in my pocket. I walked until I found a small fast food joint on a corner. A sign in the window read, "Help wanted, cleaning shift." I had no experience, no resume, nothing. But I went in anyway. The manager was a heavy-set guy with a mustache, the kind who seems gruff but isn't too bad. He looked me up and down, noticing my ragged clothes and pale face. I told him I needed help. "What can you do, kid?" he asked. I stammered a bit but said, "Anything. I'll clean, wash, carry stuff. I just need a job." He studied me for a moment, like he was deciding if I was worth a shot, then nodded. "You start today. $5 an hour. You clean the bathrooms and bus tables. Do it right. We keep going tomorrow." It wasn't much, but it was something. That day, I worked like never before. I scrubbed sticky floors, wiped tables covered in food scraps, emptied trash cans that reeked of rot. My hands shook from hunger, but I didn't complain. At the end of the shift, the manager gave me a plate of leftovers, cold fries, and half a sandwich someone didn't finish. I ate it behind the restaurant, hidden by some dumpsters like a stray dog. But I was so grateful I cried again. It was more than my parents had given me in years. With my first earnings, I bought a roll with some deli meat at a corner store and soda. I slept another night in the park, but this time with a slightly full stomach. That's how the first days went, grueling shifts, eating what I could, sleeping wherever I found a dry spot. After a week, the manager offered me more hours. "You're quiet, but you work hard," he said. He started paying me a bit more. And with that, I saved up for a cheap room in an old house. It wasn't much, a hard bed, a flickering lamp, and a shared bathroom that was always filthy. But it was mine. For the first time in my life, I had a place where I could lock the door and feel like no one could kick me out. Weeks passed, and I saved enough to buy my first laptop, something I'd wanted since I was a kid, but my parents would never get me, so I didn't hesitate. Then I found free online courses about things I'd never been taught. How to manage money, how to invest, how to build wealth from nothing. I read stories of people who'd climbed out of poverty, people who'd been through what I had, and I took notes in a notebook, picturing myself with my own house, my own business. Every word I read was like a brick for building something new, something my parents could never take away. After a few weeks, I left the fast food job and got work at a hotel. It was a modest place with small rooms for travelers and families. There I made beds, sorted towels, carried luggage. It was almost the same as the restaurant, but the pay was a bit better. I saved every penny I could and kept studying online at night. I learned about stocks, saving, how to make money work for me. 6 months later, everything changed. The hotel manager quit overnight, and the owner called me in. "Zack, you know how this place runs. You're reliable and don't mess up. Want the job?" I didn't think twice. From cleaning rooms, I moved to managing the hotel, making schedules, overseeing staff, negotiating with suppliers. The pay was good, more than I'd ever seen. The sacrifice was paying off. With that money, I bought decent clothes, new jeans, a shirt without holes, and rented a small apartment, but I kept learning. A year later, I took the big leap. With my savings and everything I'd learned, I opened my own restaurant. It was a tiny place on a quiet street, but I made it mine. I called it Hope because that's what it was to me, a piece of light after so much darkness. I hired a cook and a waiter, and I did everything else. Served tables, cleaned, kept the books. At first, it was slow, but the food was good and cheap, and people started coming. Within months, the place was packed most nights. My income shot up, and I finally bought my own apartment. A simple place with a kitchen, a big window, and a new mattress that smelled like victory. Everything I went through, my parents' scorn, the hunger, the lonely nights, changed me. The timid Zack who begged on the floor toughened up. I got strong, not because I wanted to, but because I had to. I stopped letting anyone talk down to me without pushing back. My voice, which used to tremble, now came out clear and steady. 2 years after that night in the park, my life was unrecognizable. The restaurant was doing so while I was saving to open another. Then came the moment I least expected. I was checking the day's earnings at the counter when the door opened. I looked up and saw them. My dad, thinner with gray hair, and my mom, with a tired face and none of that smug superiority she always had. They stood in front of me, awkward, like they didn't know what to say. My dad cleared his throat and mumbled, "Zack, we need to talk." My pulse raced, but it wasn't fear I felt. It was something stronger, something that had grown in me since the day they kicked me out. "We're in trouble, Zack," my dad said, his tone trying to sound gentle but coming off forced. "The business went under. We lost everything. The house, our savings, the debts are eating us alive. We need help." He paused, like he expected me to say something, but I stayed quiet, arms crossed, letting the silence crush them. My mom finally looked up and added, with a shaky voice I didn't recognize, "You're our son, Zack. We have no one else." For a second, I felt the air catch in my throat. Son? Now I was their son? After years of treating me like an old rag, kicking me out without a cent, laughing while I begged on the floor, now they pull that card? The memories hit me like a fist. The scraps on my plate, the insults, the nights alone while they went on vacation. But I didn't let it show. I stood taller, leaned my hands on the counter, and looked them in the eyes one by one. "Help," I said, almost savoring the word. "You want me to help you?" My dad nodded quickly, like he saw a light at the end of the tunnel. "Yes, son, we know you're doing well. This place, it looks like you're making money. Just a little to get us out of this hole." My mom tried to smile, a weak, fake smile, and said, "We always knew you were strong, Zack. That's why we let you go, so you could learn." That was too much. "So I could learn?" I repeated, and a dry laugh escaped me, a laugh with no joy in it. "You kicked me out the day I turned 18. You didn't even let me finish begging. You gave me a box of my torn clothes and slammed the door in my face. And now you come here, saying you always knew I was strong." My voice was rising without me stopping it, and the customers in the back turned to look, but I didn't care. I was done staying quiet. My dad raised his hands like he was trying to calm me. "Zack, we were tough on you, we know, but it was for your own good. Look at what you've done, this restaurant, all of this." He gestured around, like my success was somehow their doing. My mom nodded, desperate. "Just give us a hand, son. We have nowhere to sleep. They took everything. Please." I stared at them, letting their words hang in the air. I could see the fear in their eyes, the same desperation I felt that night in the park, shivering under the rain with my soaked box. But I didn't feel pity. I felt power. For the first time in my life, I had something they wanted, and they couldn't take it from me. I leaned a little over the counter, just enough so they had to meet my eyes, and I smiled. It wasn't a kind smile. It was one I'd been saving for 2 years, since the day I swore they'd pay. "Grown-ups have to fend for themselves," I said slow, clear, letting each word sink in. Their faces changed in a second. My dad opened his mouth, but nothing came out. My mom took a step back like I'd hit her. "That's what you told me when you kicked me out, remember? You left me on the street with no job, no money, nothing. And I survived. I stood up on my own, built this on my own. You didn't give me a crumb of help back then, so why should I give you anything now?" "Zack, please," my mom said, tears in her eyes, but I ignored them. "No," I cut in, raising a hand. "You laughed at me when I cried, called me weak, treated me like I was worthless. Now that you're down, don't come asking me to lift you up. Fend for yourselves." I stepped back, pointed to the door, and said, "Get out of my restaurant. Don't ever come back." My dad tried to speak again, his voice breaking. "Zack, we're your family." But I cut him off. "I don't have a family. I lost it the day you kicked me out." I turned, walked to the door, and flung it open. "Go." They stood there, frozen, like they couldn't believe it. But when they saw I wasn't budging, my dad took my mom by the arm, and they shuffled out, heads down that I closed the door behind them, the sound of the lock echoing in the silence. I stared at the wood for a while, my chest rising and falling fast. I didn't feel guilt, didn't feel sadness. I felt relief, like I'd finally let go of a weight I'd carried for years. That night, in my apartment, I sat in my armchair with a cup of coffee. I looked out the window, watching the town's lights, and thought about them. I didn't know where they were, and I didn't care. For the first time, I felt truly free. I'd built my life from nothing, and they had no place in it. I smiled to myself, a quiet smile, and knew that, no matter what happened, they couldn't touch me anymore. Update 1. Hey everyone. Thanks for your support and comments. After the life I had as a kid, pulling myself up is one of the best feelings I've ever had. Guess what? I saw them again. It was a cold May night. The restaurant was already empty. The last customers had left a while ago, and I was finishing up closing. I swept the floor, counted the cash in a register, and gathered the leftovers from the plates. Bits of stale bread, cold rice, pieces of meat no one finished. I put it all in a black trash bag like I always did before taking it to the dumpster on the corner. It was a simple routine, something that calmed me after a long day. I opened the back door of the restaurant and stepped into the alley with the bag in hand. There were 2 homeless people at the end of the street, but I recognized them instantly. My dad, Michael, was sitting on the pavement in a dirty old jacket that didn't shield him from the cold. My mom, Susan, was beside him, wrapped in a blanket. They looked smaller, frilier than I remembered, like life had crushed them. Before I could move, my dad looked up and saw me. His eyes widened, and a hoarse murmur came out, "Zack." My mom jerked her head up, and when she recognized me, she stood with effort, wobbling a bit. "Son, please," she said, her voice trembling. "We need help. We have nothing. We're sleeping out here." My dad tried to stand too, leaning on the wall, and added, "Just a little money, Zack. Please, you're all we have left." I stood still, the trash bag dangling in my hand. The cold bit my skin, but I didn't feel it. What I felt was a heat rising in my chest, a mix of anger and something darker. Help? Again? After everything they did to me, they still dare to ask for something? The memories hit me like lightning. Me sitting in a corner of the table, eating cold scraps while they stuffed themselves with hot food. The nights alone in the basement while they went on vacation. The day they kicked me out with a cardboard box and laughed at my tears. I didn't say anything at first. I just looked at them, letting the silence speak for me. My mom took a step forward, hands clasped like she was praying. "Zack, don't leave us like this. We're your parents." That was all I needed to hear. I opened the trash bag with one hand, grabbed a handful of leftovers, stale bread, some sticky rice, a half-eaten piece of chicken, and threw it on the ground in front of them. The scraps hit the dirt, splattering a bit, and they stared at them, frozen. "That's what you gave me," I said, my voice low but firm, like a hammer striking metal. "Scraps. Old food you didn't want. You treated me like a dog, and now here you are, begging for crumbs again." I grabbed another handful and tossed it closer to their feet. "Take it. It's all you're getting from me." My dad lowered his head, and for the first time, he didn't try to argue. My mom started crying, a faint sob barely audible in the alley. "Zack, please, don't be like this." She mumbled, but I cut her off. "That's how you were with me. You kicked me out without looking back. You left me alone, hungry, with nothing. Now it's your turn." I stepped back, still holding the bag, and looked at them one last time. "Don't come looking for me again. You have no business near me." I didn't feel guilt. I didn't feel regret. I felt like a circle had finally closed. They gave me scraps my whole life, and now I'd given them the same. Outside, the cold lingered, but inside me was a strange calm, like I'd let go of something I'd been carrying for years. That night, I slept in my apartment, in my clean bed, knowing the past couldn't reach me anymore.
Subscribe for more daily stories.